Okay. Welcome everybody. So we've got a few things to chat about tonight. First of all, I think there's an update on annual town meeting schedule, right? Does anybody actually, maybe I should save that for Gabe. Do we actually have a confirmed date? I know there was two dates that were being considered. Is that, Susie? It sounds like you have some.
End of May, isn't it?
It's going to be May 31st or June 7th. I don't know if they decided.
Okay.
The decision's going to be made at the 25th meeting.
Okay, so it's either May 31st or June, what was that date?
June 7th.
Or June 7th. Okay, yeah, of course.
I think they're leaning towards the 31st.
Okay. All right. So I think that would,
Susie, which day did you say they're leaning towards?
31st.
Okay,
I'll answer for Susie.
thank you.
So
Susie didn't argue with you.
include
so
why
I'll-
that
I'll-
changed? We were told there was not going to be any possibility of it changing.
What I guess what the issue is that town elections can't be changed, but the select board can change town meetings. So town elections are going to be on the 27th of April.
6th,
Well, that's good news for us.
the
Oh, yeah.
26th.
Yes,
Oh, 26th.
it isn't, it isn't.
That's right.
Yeah,
I think
this
George.
just drags on, yes.
I think the other issue is that I should have flagged this. I don't know why I did, but that the original, I guess the 26th is the tail end of
School
the spring
vacation.
break
Yeah.
for public schools, and so that's not an ideal time to for parents of school age children to attend a town meeting. So I think it's a good move for a few different reasons. All right. Hi Gabe. We were just going over the update on annual town meeting. So just updating our calendar. All right, why don't we take a look at minutes from March 4th, I think it was, yeah.
Yes.
And I think Susie, you did these for us, right?
Yep.
So thank you. All right. So I don't know if folks had a chance to review these, but are there any questions or suggestions? I took a quick look and didn't see anything.
Well, I had a couple questions. I wasn't here, but I do have some questions.
Go ahead.
It looked to me like item I, the $6,000 for the antifreeze,
Mhm.
looks like bullets D and E are out of place. A reference to the legal budget and the building repairs, or is that just a conversation about our free cash? No, it just seems like those two items are out of place.
I think that was,
Part of the conversation.
yeah, I think it sort of came up, right, in the context of
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
right,
That's
because-
all right.
so yeah, so the issue was concern about the
Oh, right. I remember.
availability of FinCom reserves, given some of these other expected needs that are coming between now and the end of the fiscal year.
Now I understand. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, now I get it. And then in capital requests, I noticed that we listed the grader and talked about the grader and talked about the parking lot and the zero turn mower, but there was no reference to the dam. There was a request for a dam repair.
Oh, I don't think that came up at all, yeah.
It didn't come up, right? Well, then it shouldn't be there, but there is.
Okay,
Although it looks like, we might be okay on the funding of that because of grants and CPA, it might not affect the budget.
Yeah.
And then the very end, well, not the very end, and number 5, the 26 draft budget changes, the very last G, less free cash generated in FY, I think you meant to say FY 24 or FY 25.
Well, we were saying that less free cash will be generated in 25 because we are expending most of the lines fully.
Oh, okay. All right. Less free cash will be generated in
Will likely
FY
be generated.
25.
Yeah,
Susie,
Boy.
you're doing these, right? You're going to turn these in, or you want me to do it?
no, I'll turn them in when we're through.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's it for me. That's all I saw.
Mhm,
It was more clarification for me.
mhm.
all right. Anybody else have questions or suggestions? Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the March 4th minutes as amended.
I don't think there were any amendments, were there?
Yeah,
Just
we were
that-
adding to be generated in
Yeah, just that.
25.
Just this one sentence, I think, and it was missing the 25, so 5G.
To be generated in FY 25.
That's not to be
Oh.
generated. Instead of likely, you want it to say to be generated.
Oh, no, I didn't, on mine, I didn't see the to be on it. Maybe.
I added this while we were talking. So,
Oh.
so this sentence here, less free cash likely to be generated in FY, and then we've got to put in 25 due to expected full expenditure of most lines.
25's in there already.
Oh,
No,
No, it isn't.
I didn't see it.
No, it wasn't.
no, AJ just added that.
No, it's on my rough draft.
All right. Okay, the other thing, it said that the if you scroll down, it said that we approved the 3/4/25
Oh, yeah,
minutes, and that should be from the previous week.
yeah, so
2
that would
weeks.
have been, let's see, that would have been.
That's a test.
That should say February 18th, I think, yeah.
Oh,
So
right.
that's, yeah, so I think this
Yep.
is February 18th.
218.
Yeah.
Did you turn those into, Grace?
He did.
Okay.
It's a long time ago, though.
I just want to make sure there's no gaps in the sequence here.
I know. Yep, so I'll edit those things. So as amended.
Great.
Okay.
So I think we have a second. Did I hear,
Second by Bob.
George?
Arvanitis abstain.
Groves, aye.
Oh, but
Hemingway.
Grove wasn't there.
Yeah,
Oh, I wasn't there.
yeah,
Really?
2 abstains there.
Okay, I guess I will abstain after all.
Hemingway,
Right,
aye.
long time ago.
Sorry, Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Stein, I.
Salvador, I.
And Stein, I.
Right. So 5. Motion passes 5 votes, 2 abstentions. All right, great. All right, so let's think about how we want to handle the rest of tonight's meeting. So we've got a few things. Let's just kind of do a quick review and then dive in. We've got to talk about the regional school budget. There's some new developments from last week that are going to require some deliberation and a response from us. And then we're going to look at the current draft FY26 budget, have a discussion about how to address a deficit that's above $300,000 right now. And then I think there's some I didn't have a chance to look at that, Kathy and April, but I think there's some updates from the personnel committee that we ought to discuss tonight. Do we want to do that now?
It's gonna have
Sure.
budget implications, right?
Yes,
So let's, let me share.
Yeah, I
the
could not open that document on my computer, so I sent it along to you.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna share it now. Actually, I think both you and Kathy sent me, it looked like it was the same document, but you can tell me.
yeah.
All right. So do one of you want to kind of talk us through what we're looking at and what our implications are for the budget?
Could you blow it up a little, AJ?
Yeah. Yeah, I unfortunately missed this section of the meeting. But I think between Kathy and I, we can certainly talk about
Yeah,
it.
I can stumble through it.
We'll stumble through it together.
What we discovered was there were 6 positions that were significantly underpaid, and we talked a lot about what to do with regard to those positions after we apply the 3.32% COLA for this year. And we looked at the average column without the high and low that George had put together. We thought that made the most sense. And we had Melissa on the call, and she knew the hours for each position, which is what we had been missing, I think, in the prior meeting to determine what the impact would be of any adjustment or alignment that we decided to make. So, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Let me just hang this up. Husband is at the Jim McGovern town meeting.
Oh,
Oh, nice, in Greenfield, excellent.
Yeah.
you should be there.
So yeah, I was feeling guilty not going, but I sent him anyway. So anyway, we looked at how those 6 positions, and you can kind of see they're the ones that are highlighted in purple, with the exception of the administrative assistant, which was just recently hired. So we looked at their pay rates as compared to the average without the high-low numbers included. We figured out what the impact would be over annually. And that's the column per year if we increase to the full amount, to the full average without the high-low.
That's this
And
column?
yeah,
Yep.
that one. And then as we talked, knowing that there's a deficit that we're already dealing with, we all thought that it might be a good idea to consider maybe year 1 doing a 50% increase to get them closer to that average. And then with the idea that next year there'd be another look at their pay rates and another analysis done to see if it would be possible to move even closer to the average. Is that clear as mud? Did I get that right, April?
No, you got it totally right. It's
Okay.
totally right.
Right.
I also noticed we did not include the town administrator in this, and I believe our thinking has been that was being hired at that was sort of it's set in stone.
Well, it's gonna be negotiated in the hiring process.
Yeah, and we don't know. I probably was going to be 85,000. It's what it was advertised at.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why
We do have a contract with the new town administrator, and it averages out to 87 something. She's getting 85 for the first 6 months, and then moving her to 9,500 for the next 6 months. The lady is taking a $10,000 cut in pay
Ooh.
to come to Shutesbury. The reason she wants to is she wants to learn town administration, but that's a healthy deduction to ask someone to take. Her salary in Amherst is 96.
So how did it, so 85,000 for 6 months and then another 9,500 added onto that?
90,000.
Then her pay rate changes to 90,500. That's all prorated.
Okay.
So in your budget, you will see it at 87,000 something because we prorated it.
Okay.
So that's what's in the budget that you sent me.
Yes,
Jane?
yes, yes.
Okay.
All right. So, did the personnel committee actually like vote and sort of formally make this recommendation?
We did.
Yes.
Okay. That recommendation being the 50%
Yes.
Oh.
increase for this year one? Okay. Bob,
I want to just ask a question or make a comment about your methodology, because, you know, this methodology is based upon, as you say, low and high and average. And then if we're below average, then we should presumably go up to average, to be fair. Is that right?
Yes.
Well,
Well, just to clarify, it's not just the fact that they're below average, it's that they were significantly below average.
And let me just complete my thought, which is this methodology would ensure that rates of pay across any district that's using this method would continually go up. Because when we're below average and we come up to average, we just raise the average.
Mhm.
Our numbers not included in the average. When I put that together, I do not put Shutesbury's number in it.
But
Right, okay, well, that's something that wasn't clear to me. I'll take that in. But I don't like the idea of going to averages because, first of all, I understand what you're trying to do, and I do think it's a legitimate thing to be fair to our employees. But there's nothing necessarily comparable about work duties from one town to the other, and that's sort of inherently assumed in this method. And it's sort of like mindless to not analyze the individual employee, the individual employee's performance, his or her duties, and how they feel about their compensation, and just use a method that's like this, which is mathematical. Doesn't seem to me to be sensible.
well, it doesn't seem plausible for us to be, interviewing the accountants of different towns and things like that. I think we have to start with something and find a way for our town to remain competitive. So we can keep the good employees we have.
And I think the assumption is we might have heard or we might have been notified if there was anybody who wasn't performing satisfactorily. I think, I don't know, I'm new to the personnel board, but I'm assuming that that's something that might have come up as we were discussing the roles. I don't know.
Well, yeah, certainly if you read our handbook, there is a procedure, there is a process for underperforming employees for whom there are concerns. I don't remember if the personnel board is involved in that or not, or would be aware of anybody.
Well, again, if this is a method that's going to be used region-wide, then our performance and our raises that we provide will actually end up being included in the mass and in the general analysis. So, what I don't like to see is I don't like to see pressure on our budget year to year. This is like we're talking $20,000 of pressure being created by this method. We already have problems maintaining fiscal level funding, or not level funding, but level services budget. And instead of looking for ways to be more efficient in delivering services, we're looking for ways to maybe retain employees longer and make them happier, but at greater expense. That bothers me.
But I think inherent in keeping really well-trained, competent employees is that there is more efficiency. We have a phenomenal team of employees with lots of years of experience, and I think they've done as well. And I think that there's an efficiency in that as well.
Susie?
We're also seeing, when we go out to hire people, that the area that people are coming in at higher salary rates across the board, every position. And the idea of retaining our workers who have the experience and have shown that they can do the job keeps us from going out in the marketplace and getting an unknown at the same price or more, because that's what's happening in hiring.
I had a quick question. So it looks like the personnel board made a conscious decision to use this average without high-low value as opposed to the median pay rates as kind of the benchmark to compare our salary rates. Can anybody speak to what the rationale for that was? I guess you got to pick one, but I'm just curious. It's on, you have the data on this chart, so it seems like at some point you probably thought about the logic of using the median value.
Rather than.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just trying to find a way to be somewhat moderate in our assumptions, and yeah.
I think if I'm remembering correctly, and George maybe knows this better, but the high was really high and really skewed the average, or really skewed the number. And I forget what the low was, but I just remember that the high was kind of really out there.
It's such a broad range of towns across Franklin County that, yeah, you had some really, that's why I decided to take the highs and the lows out, because not every position, but for many positions, they just weren't in line. And you wonder what else is going on in those towns and those positions that might cause somebody to get paid extra. They're shoveling the walk when it snows and they're getting something extra for it. And in another town, who knows? So I put those in there, but I wasn't in the meeting when the personnel board made this decision, so I can't answer to why they chose the average versus the median. I will say, by looking at it, the obvious one that you might not want to consider is the assistant town clerk. Certainly versus the median, she's okay. And then the administrative assistant, it's the two numbers are varied by quite a lot, but that's already been changed, as it was pointed out. Anyways,
So just a question, maybe I'll ask to anybody here who knows about this. What towns exactly are we talking about? Because to my mind, a town like, say, South Deerfield is very different from Shutesbury in terms
yeah,
of.
I can answer that, Bob. Yeah, no, I can. We don't count Orange, we don't count Deerfield, Greenfield, Montague. I think those are the ones I excluded. And then there was another schedule that Franklin County provides that had Petersham in it and Plainfield in it, so I threw those in. And one other.
Well, those are certainly more comparable towns to
Yeah,
us.
no, that's what I did. I tried to go by population, yes.
Susie?
The other thing that we know is right now, wages are very volatile, lots of changes. So we don't know if any of the towns in the chart are also making course corrections on their people. Because you can look around and see that in the positions that people are talking about in the paper, there's all sorts of salaries out there right now in all sorts of positions. It's very volatile.
It's a buyer's market. If you're an employee, it's been that way since the pandemic. You can negotiate salaries. We've seen it across the country in the union contracts that have been signed, and we've certainly seen it in the school contracts in the Valley. And as Susie pointed out, the recent hires, the town administrator is going to be making a lot more money than Becky was, and it looks like the police chief probably will be, and it's unfortunate for the taxpayer and business.
I have one other question. And this is kind of more for future studies of this kind. I assume this data that you're getting is provided by FERCog, is that?
Yes, it's two FERCog wage and salary summaries, one for Franklin County and one for other towns, which was limited.
Got it. And do they provide any data on the seniority levels?
Yes, that shows years of service.
Okay.
It shows date of hire for the current positions.
All right. So I think, like, it might be interesting, and not for the purpose of this year's analysis, but in future years, if you could add, if there was a way to sort of add that dimension of longevity or into thinking about sort of how our employees are being paid relative to their counterparts in other towns of a roughly similar seniority level. Like that might be, I know that complicates the analysis, and that might be, that might be a
We
big
might be
add.
able to, we might be able to quantify it by using factors.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's over 5 years, use adjust their salary by 1.5 down.
Yeah.
Somebody is only a few years, adjusted up by 1.1. I mean, you know, I suppose that's something the personnel board could.
Yeah, just something to think about, because I think that might help. You know, that sort of speaks to the goal of making this as much of a kind of apples to apples kind of comparison. You know, if there was a way to sort of add that dimension of seniority. Susie.
The Union 28 schools, after they hammered through the Shutesbury teacher's contract, found a software program that's in live time that considers a ton of factors in terms of salary, setting salaries. Because the Shutesbury committee worked really long and really hard, and it's very overwhelming for volunteers to consider a ton of information. But they were all extremely happy because the other 3 towns in the U28 have contracts to be negotiated, and they found this tool that helps consider all those factors. I don't know if there's one for municipal positions or if we even want to think about it, but what it showed me was how hard it is for volunteers to figure out all the information that goes into contract negotiations.
Do you happen to know the name of the program?
No, I can find it out. It's probably in one of these folders. I'll send it to you.
All right. Okay, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I think I'm gonna make a motion to endorse the personnel board's recommendation to implement this 50% sort of increase for these 6 positions. Is that correct? That you've identified?
6.
Yeah, I think I'd like to make that motion just because I think we're going to need to, if we're going to need to some direction about whether to implement these changes into our budget for FY26.
Second.
All right. Any other discussion about this, George?
No.
I'd just like to ask for one question or make a point, which is, we've talked about this in the past, that there's a notation here that most towns outsource their accounting to FERCog. And I wonder whether we should be looking into that just to see what that costs.
It's very expensive.
Yeah, it is. The accountant, it's like $71 an hour. And that's our future. I think when it comes time for an accountant, we're probably going to have to go to FERCog because it's.
So that's not a reasonable.
Yeah, I know, but when you look at most of the towns are doing it, there's a reason. And it's probably the reason is they're hard to come by. They're hard to find. We're lucky. I mean, we really have a highly experienced accountant, and she's retired from other towns and is
Yeah, she's great.
You work for us.
Right.
So I consider ourselves
And
lucky.
she's
but
going to retire
unfortunately,
when?
Yeah. Like what we've seen with these other positions lately, we're going to be in the same boat with the accountant.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's my question.
Gabe? You're on mute.
FERCog has ended their accounting program as of this year.
Ooh.
They have totally ended it. And the towns that those accountants worked for are now negotiating with those accountants to keep them. So what towns are having to do is outsource town accounting to out-of-state sources that provide it. I know that Hubbardston's accountant lives in Florida.
Wow.
And if you kept track of what happened to Hadley, they outsourced theirs and it ended up being a disaster. So it's definitely a problem and you can't count on FERCog anymore.
Wow,
Mm.
that's huge.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments about the motion? All right, seeing none, why don't we start voting? George,
Arvanitis, aye.
Rose, aye.
Hemingway, I.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, I.
Salvador, I.
Stein, aye.
Okay, motion passes 7-0. All right. So we've got 6 lines. We don't have to do it on the fly right now, but we've got 6 lines that we're gonna have to update in our budget. But let's just keep in mind right now that we are adding $10,327.40 to our expense side of our budget. Okay. Thanks, Kathy and April, for walking us through that.
Sure.
All right. Why don't I tee up the ARPS discussion now? So there's been a lot of, I think the last, that we've all kind of had specific numbers and talked about the regional budget was coming out of the last 4 towns meeting, where we were looking at an increase in our assessment of 5.61%. A couple things have happened in the interim, and rather than kind of like, I could talk for a while about all the different things that have gone on, but basically the regional school committee last week voted a budget that did something similar to what happened last year, which is they've voted to increase the total assessment by 6.5%, and to apply that increase to all 4 municipalities. So every town in the currently approved voted budget, every town's assessment is increasing by 6.5%. I ought to share this. I have a spreadsheet that I've been using to kind of keep track of things. So this highlighted in blue is the budget that the region just approved last week. Okay, so obviously this has a couple of implications. I think one positive thing, right, which is that the cuts required in this budget has basically reduced from 1.3 million, or just under that, to $812,000. If you've been following the commentary on the proposed cuts, they were quite significant, and they particularly impacted the middle school, and there were lots of student-facing positions. There were basically, if anybody has familiar with the current structure at the middle school, they have a team structure, 2 teams for the 6th grade, 2 teams for the 7th grade, team consisting of 4 core academic teachers in social studies, English, math, and science. And the proposed cut, based on the 4 towns budget, was to eliminate one of those teams and to basically have a 3-team structure and require teachers to teach additional sections or, of their subject area. So I mean, it's kind of remarkable how similar the way in which events have unfolded this year. There was significant kind of public comment about and concerns raised by families and teachers, particularly at the middle school, about those proposed cuts. The region, and I think, has been hearing lots of feedback, and that I think ultimately motivated them to try to pass a budget that was going to minimize the amount of student-facing cuts. There still are student-facing cuts in this budget, but they are not as draconian as the ones they would be facing under the budget that we discussed at the last Full Towns meeting. So this has two implications for us. It would increase our assessment by almost $15,000, meaning an additional $15,000 above what we discussed at our last Four Towns meeting. Our assessment would increase from $92,795 to $107,517. Okay, that's implication one. So we have to have a discussion about whether we think we can absorb that kind of an increase. And for the second year in a row, this would blow apart the allocation method that we've been advocating for. I think we have to, we're going to need to discuss and sort of take a position on this. I'll just explain a few other things about what you're looking at here, just in case it comes up in the course of our discussion. At last week's meeting, the regional school committee actually considered two different models. I guess technically three models. One was a level services budget, which they quickly dispensed with and said that was not anything that they could contemplate. But then most of their discussion was spent considering these two models, and a guardrail, they're calling them guardrail models. The first model, had the same increase for three municipalities, the 6.5%, and it increased Amherst assessment to basically 5.5%. And then, so there was a fair amount of discussion about these two and about whether, Amherst, whether it was going to be viable to ask Amherst to increase. By the way, Amherst Town Council has not agreed to an increase above 4%. I mean, like their last negotiation about this was that they were coming up from 3.5% to 4%. So so anyway, ultimately they decided that they felt like they needed to act in the best interests of students and teachers and endorse the model that they thought would ultimately be best for the schools. And so they elected to approve this budget here. So I did a couple things just to kind of help me sort of think about this. One was, I said, what if they actually had applied the modified statutory method to this budget, right? So this total budget with this amount of assessment required, what would the modified statutory method have required each town to pay if we were using that allocation method to approve the same budget? And so this is the result of that. And you can see what's happening, right, is that the budget that they passed is requires Amherst to pay almost 2% more than they would be under the statutory method. And then all other three towns are under their method, their approved budget are underpaying relative to what the statutory method would have required. Less so for us, but significantly so for Pelham and Lebanon. And then the last thing, and then I'll stop talking, I did was I wanted to take a look at what might be the implications for next year, FY27. And so what I did was I created a budget, hypothetical budget for FY27 that assumed that the amount of assessment required next year is going to be 4% higher than what they've just approved or voted on for this year. And then I said, what if we actually applied the modified statutory method to this assessment required? What would it require of each of the towns? And this is basically assuming that the modified statutory next year is going to proportionally require the same proportion of funding from each of the four towns that it did for this year. Obviously, the factors that go into modified statutory are going to be updated next year, and so maybe there might be some changes. But assuming the formula basically, results in the same distribution of what each town should pay, what would that require of each town? And what you can see what that would do here is it would require a 5.6% increase in our assessment, a 2.35% increase for Amherst, and then pretty big increases once again for Pelham and Lebanon. So that was just, I just kind of wanted to have a little bit of a picture of what next year might look like based on what the region is proposing we do this year. Okay, so let me stop talking and see if we have questions or comments. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to say, for me, this method, what's being proposed by the regional school committee is difficult to accept, because after all the work we did, 4 town meetings, all the discussions and so forth, and as you all know, I'm very keen on us maintaining the modified statutory method, and what they're proposing is going to get us further away from that, as you pointed out, and that really bothers me. I would not support that. I would prefer to. I would critique their budget in this way, that their increases on a year-to-year basis are just not reasonable for towns who have to maintain something around 2.5% increase in taxes at a given fiscal year. So 4, 5, 6% increases they have to do better than that. They have to find a way to do better than that. And the thing that really sticks out in my mind is that a lot of the COVID-related hires are still in the budget, and I don't think that's right. I think that's something that should have been adjusted, that those people were hired for the COVID emergency, but those hires stuck, and we're told that they're absolutely necessary. And then when somebody's going to be let go, it's not going to be those employees, it's going to be teachers. And I don't find that logical. I think that the teaching positions are more crucial to the object that we're financing, which is education. So, but again, going further out away from the statutory method, when look, as you pointed out, AJ, there are other variables in this method other than what the particular town's increase will be in a given year. For example, I talked to John Trickey for quite a while this morning after reading about this in the Gazette, and the enrollment in Pelham has been increasing in the last couple of years. So it's completely fair that they should be paying more to the region when their enrollment is going up. In addition to that, they rate the formula, the Q factor or whatever they call it, their higher income community, their real estate is higher value than Shutesbury. They don't have the challenges that Amherst has with special needs students either. So the idea that they can't just bite the bullet and come up and cough up some money, that doesn't accord with my values. I think that they said they're going to provide $20,000 on top of their assessment to throw into the pile. Why they're just not willing to increase their assessment, I don't know. He said that would make Leverett obligated to do the same thing if they did that. So
Bob, can you repeat what you just said? What is Pelham doing?
he said that they will support.
6 point.
Yes, they were having a meeting tonight, so I don't know what they've decided to do, but he thought that they would support the 4% option for Amherst to come up with 4%, not the 6.5%, or actually whatever the second option was, the 5.5. But that's him not knowing that Amherst will support that. But as he pointed out, if the small towns all agree on this budget, then Amherst will, just like last year, as you pointed out, AJ, Amherst will have to go with it because it's a majority rule on the budget. It doesn't have to be unanimous. So there's going to be a lot of political heat. There's no two ways about it. But I for one, don't support this guardrail system that's being proposed. And I kind of resent the regional school committee coming in and doing what they did last year and changing everything that we so arduously worked out. So that's my position.
Yeah. Sorry, let me just make one kind of clarifying point. I should have mentioned this is I think one of the issues that the superintendent and the finance director have raised is they had preliminary conversations with DESE about the direction that we were moving towards coming out of the Four Towns meeting, where there's sort of a differential guardrail being applied to, one or two towns.
Right.
And apparently DESE gave feedback to them that they did not like that, and they thought that was not something that they could approve. And so the way in which we've written guardrails in the past is apparently acceptable to them, where we say, which I think is kind of ridiculous, but where we say we're going to do this statutory method and then impose a fixed guardrail. And if all four towns happen to butt up against that guardrail, then all four towns basically increase by that amount. So that might be part of the logic. I don't know if
I think you're right. That's what he was on about, I believe.
Yeah. So John Trickey might be saying, well, we can make a gift, and that way it doesn't foul up the guardrail.
Seems ridiculous, even more ridiculous, but there it is.
Yeah. So that may be part of it. But did I hear you correctly that at least his perspective is they think they could contribute an additional $20,000 above this 6.
I think that's the number he used, 20,000. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're going to contribute $20,000 above the assessment from the four-town meeting.
And they'd be willing to accept that as their base next year, he said.
Yeah. So they would do that as a kind of an additional gift this year, George. I did hear a little bit about this. But then next year they would incorporate that into their base so that when we do,
they'd be closer to the statutory requirements. But of course, that's about the time when their affordable housing is going to come into play. So their assessment will go down.
Yeah, they got some new growth coming. Good for them.
And it's
So,
going to be
because I'm taking the minutes, I just want to make sure I understand. So superintendent and finance director spoke with DESE about our assessment method, and they're okay with the way we used to apply the guardrail, but they don't like the way we're applying it this year. Is that what I heard?
no, it's they don't like the idea of applying a different guardrail for for a subset of municipalities.
Oh, I see, right. It has to be applied evenly.
Yes.
So
it has to be-
option one wouldn't have worked in the DESI model.
Right.
Option one has a differential.
um,
Got it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Susie?
I think that the process still has to get fixed. I don't know if it can get fixed for this year, but what seems to have happened is that the superintendent brought some options to the four-town meeting, and there was good support and agreement, but there was no details yet. And there's always this part where you don't start telling the details of the cuts because it freaks out the staff that's there, and that's not how you do it. Once those details come out, the school committee, the Amherst School Committee, or Regional School Committee, excuse me, and the parents and the cuts created a lot of upheaval. But that came a month and a week, 5, 6 weeks after our February 8th meeting. So when we leave that meeting, we have a sense of how things are. And then when the details start to emerge, it changes because of this separate group, the finance arm of the Regional School Committee. And somehow, I don't know what their process is, like how much members of the school committee were in designing the four-town frame. I don't know how they did that, but we either have to change our expectations that we're not going to know until later, and that the Amherst School Committee is going to act on the response they're getting from parents and staff. The middle school has been a very tumultuous place right now. They haven't had clear leadership. They might not have had a clear advocate. The interim principal left. And they do need to have some support to straighten out and get that flying right. So I agree with why they don't want to cut the one of the teams from 7th or 8th grade and make another model. But I wish we had accurate expectations of this process, and I'm not sure we can get them.
Yeah, the timing's not good.
George?
Yeah, so I'm looking at what we all thought we were going to go into town meeting with from the four-town budget. And then I'm looking at this guardrail method that was approved by the school committee. And so for Leverett and Pelham, they don't care, right? It's the same number for them. And it really comes down to what Amherst wants to do. And there's quite a significant difference in their increase, right, from year to year. If Amherst votes for it and agrees to a 1.224 million increase in their budget, does Shutesbury really want to say, well, we don't want to spend an extra $15,000? You know, I don't think that's gonna, I don't think I'd be comfortable doing that. I think at that point, if Amherst approves it, I personally would feel like I can't get in the way if Amherst is willing to raise $500,000 or call it 475. I'm not going to object to raising it 14,722.
George, just could I speak to that for a sec, just shortly?
Sure, go ahead, Bob.
I just want to say, if we all vote to support this budget as it's been delineated here with the 6.5% guardrails, Amherst will have to accept it. This is what last year I voted to support the proposal that we had worked out here. And part of the reason I did so, and I think I mentioned it at our meeting at the time, was I was sure that Amherst wasn't going to support. And sure enough, they didn't support it, but they had to support it. They had, not only was there a lot of pitchforks outside town hall in Amherst, but they were obligated legally to do it because the other three towns had all voted yay on it. And if that happens again, then we haven't addressed the financial issue here. Susie referred to it. I think April's referred to it in the past. We tried to start the process earlier this year so we could have a more fluid process that was where back and forth could be hopefully resolve some of the surprises we dealt with last year and the difficulty it was absorbing the increases into our budget. And it didn't really work out any much differently in the end, which is more than disappointing. I think, my point of view, to be totally frank about it, at some point you have to say no. You have to do with something financially responsible with your budget. You can't just come up with something that is your version of what the budget is. It has to be doable by the taxpayers' finances too. And we're dealing with a gap, already a formidable gap. We just added another $10,500 to it, our last subject. And here's another chunk of change that we're going to have to pile on. How are we going to deal with this? This is a 4, 5, 6% increases every year are not sustainable. I know that the people have a very, very tough job down there. I absolutely sympathize with their dilemma, but there's not an endless supply of money. I think that has to be remembered. Taxpayers aren't getting automatic raises on the Social Security. My Social Security went up a couple bucks a month. That's it. And so, I think we have to stand firm and ask the school committee to do better to reduce their ask.
I just want to clarify one thing, Bob. Only 3 municipalities need to pass the budget. But the assessment method, which as you know, is a separate action, even though it's totally linked to the budget.
But it's a warrant article on its own.
Has to be approved by all 4 municipalities. It has to be unanimous. And I do think that that Amherst is, I know because they've talked to us at the 4 towns meetings about this. There are some counselors in Amherst that really feel very strongly about not utilizing the statutory method, and they are exactly in the position that we were in for years, right? That they are now in exactly the same position that we were, and so I actually think it's plausible that regardless of whether they agree to make this contribution, they could vote to not approve the assessment method, which would have the same implication as if we were voting down the budget, because it would be going to 112 budget and all of that. But anyway, just wanted to clarify that. George?
Yeah, so I hear what Bob is saying. It seems to me that our reaction should be, I would like our reaction to be, we agree to the budget at the 4-town meeting. Financially, we just can't absorb anymore. And Amherst will decide if they force us into this. If Amherst approves back to what I said earlier, then I would support the assessment method, because I'm not getting in the way of the 14,722. But I think I guess we have to vote today or they're asking us for feedback. My feedback, I recommend that we stick with the 4-town budget.
Okay, April?
Yeah, I guess there are a couple of things. One is, the process still stinks, is that rather than meeting earlier, we should have a 4-town meeting now. I mean, I think that's a link that hasn't happened so that we can talk about this. I'm also highly aware the more we do this, the statutory method becomes less and less viable. It really skews it. And there's something important about assessing by population and ability to pay. And that part is disturbing. If there's any way we can reduce the cut to the school, I would support that. I highly value education, and the challenges that the schools are facing right now are incredible. So I'm not sure, but anyway, that's where I am.
Susie?
2 points I have is we asked all budgets to come in at level services. And the regional school is the only one, multiple years, who has come in and faced a below level services cut. They're the only one, and it's their only one this year. And so I think we have to grapple with that some. Just because it's a big budget doesn't mean that it can function with these cuts that have happened year over year. And the other piece is that there's somewhat the same thinking that a big town like Amherst should be able to do more than what the statutory assessment says they should do. And that's not a good tool to use. That's not a good rationale to use, because we would like to be using the statutory method. And when they went to 4%, that's over what they needed to do. I don't know how they're going to feel about their moment of generosity going from 3.5 to being beaten with a stick to go to 6.5. And the comment that was in the paper by Anna, it's this belief that somehow, because they're a big dog, they should be able to exceed the theory of equitable assessment from statutory. And I feel like we need to make sure we're not using that rationale. Just because they're a bigger town doesn't mean they should pay outside of the statutory formula.
May I speak I want to support and echo what Susie just said. I think that, first of all, they're not going to buy that. And secondly, it's presumptuous for us to make that argument. We're the ones that led the charge for the statutory method because we believe in its equity.
Yeah.
So it's not, when you believe in something as being more fair-minded, you don't abandon it when it's all of a sudden less convenient. You stick with it, and that's what we should be doing. And if Amherst, we can't. I'm not going to talk about Amherst finances. They have much more complicated and demanding finances than we do in many ways. But it was clear, as AJ said, that there's some counselors whose backs are going to really be up if they're going to be asked to provide 6.5. And I think for good reason. I think what Susie said is right, that we support the statutory method. Let's do the math and let's pay our share. That's a separate issue from the budget. Of course, those things are related. But as far as the assessment method being unanimous, this assessment method that's being shown in blue is trashing the statutory method. So I don't know how we can call that keeping it intact. It's trashed it completely. So
yeah, it's like, honestly, it's this is kind of the same. I mean, I had a discussion with Doug Slaughter about this last year, and it's sort of the fact that at some point in this process there was math involved that that corresponded to the statutory method is irrelevant if at the end of the process you completely throw it out and just apply. It's sort of like you could have had any arbitrary methodology that you used at one point in the process. It's no longer a guardrail in the way that we had talked about it when the concept was originally thought about. So I'm wondering if I ought to ask Shannon and the superintendent that to convene a four towns meeting, like that we feel like there are too many issues raised by this budget that are really require us to negotiate with other towns to be able to kind of proceed without having that opportunity. What do other people think about that idea?
I'm just checking. Desi wouldn't approve the four-town meeting vote, right? Because it's differentiated, not, and so unless Amherst wanted to put in their share under the statutory and then gift the rest of the money. Is that so I don't even know that we have a four-town budget to argue about.
Yeah, I'm not so much suggesting about arguing about between the four towns budget and this budget. I'm actually thinking about, like, do we need a different budget altogether? And maybe this idea of what Pelham is doing, maybe there's something to that. And maybe we should insist on Leverett making, doing something comparable. And so, you know, maybe we find a way to, for this year, to proceed with for the purpose of appeasing Desi with a fixed guardrail budget for all towns, but then, you know, we basically insist on two towns making an additional
Gift.
contribution, and then that basically becomes part of their base next year, and then that makes it easier for us to move towards statutory. I don't know, something along those lines. I mean,
Here's an idea, AJ. How about we use a statutory method?
yeah.
Just use it this year and ask Pelham and Leverett to cough up.
So just to be clear, if we were to do that with the budget that at least the region wants, which only reduces, or which only requires $812,000 in cuts, we would be paying, we would be looking at an increase that I don't think is manageable for us. So this is a little bit of, we have to be careful about what we ask for, right?
Right.
If we ask them to apply, to do the statutory method on this budget, yeah, Amherst will be probably way more likely to approve it because they only have to increase from 4 to 4.78%. But, and forget about Leverett and Pella, but what about us? I don't think we can actually absorb that kind of an increase. So, you know, we should be a little bit careful about asking that.
Yeah, one of the other variables is the budget itself. So, you know, again, that's, I don't know if that's sacrosanct here, but not.
Right. Yeah, that's what's complicated, right? Is that we really, like, we have to have a position on these two different issues, on the budget and what's a reasonable thing to ask of the region that's not going to have, you know, a kind of detrimental impact on student experiences that that's going to have long-term implications. Like, we have to sort of consider that issue, but then we also have to consider this other issue of, well, what is a fair way to allocate the assessment that's required. April, and then George.
Well, and Desi has determined that the statutory method is the way to fairly, that seems to work for most communities. I think we've really messed it up over years by, you know, using the guardrail and sort of just throwing it away. And so we have to figure out, again, how to get back up to it. And I also support, not that I want one as another four-town meeting, because I just don't see how we can do it without sitting down in a room together.
George?
Yeah, I don't like four-town meetings, but I agree. I think that's probably the right thing to do. I'm just thinking we should keep our head down because it all depends on what Amherst does. At this point, we have a number. It's the number all the towns were running with up until Friday. And I just don't think we should give a whole lot of feedback other than we have a serious deficit facing us, and going higher than 5.61 is going to be very difficult for us.
So I agree with what you're saying, George, but I would add one other thing, which is that we also have a concern about our region's commitment to
Statutory method.
this allocation method that we've all agreed is ultimately the end goal, right? Or at least two of the four municipalities have said that over and over again. And I think the other two, even at our last meeting, at our last four towns meeting, acknowledged that that is a goal. They just, you know, their feedback was that they can't get there in 1 year, but I think it's fair to say that Pelham and Leverett at least articulated the idea that, yes, we recognize that we need to move in that direction. So I think, I think it's appropriate for me to give feedback that we have really significant concerns about for potentially for the second year in a row, completely throwing that methodology out of the process entirely. I think that's a fair thing to say at this point. Susie?
We also have the timeline process now that we are moving our town meeting to the 31st of May or into June. I don't remember when Amherst comes up with their vote. And that, I mean, we could have a 4-town meeting and tell them what we're planning to do or what they're planning to do, but we won't really know the sequence of votes until we get closer.
Yeah. So Pelham's annual town meeting is second Saturday in May. And I just want to see what Leverett's is. So Leverett's the challenge. They're April 27th. No, that's last year. May 3rd. All right. So I think if we were to ask for a 4-towns meeting, I think it would have to happen really soon. Yeah. So how does that sound? If I contact Shannon and give her the following feedback. One, we are struggling with a significant deficit right now and had been assuming, and that's with the assumption that we would be facing a 5.61% increase in our assessment. And we have significant concerns about the region's commitment to a modified statutory method. And we are concerned about, whether Amherst is going to be able to meet this budget number. And for all those reasons, we think it's a good idea to convene a 4-towns meeting as soon as possible. Is that, do folks think that's appropriate feedback to share?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that's what I'm gonna do. Here's what I'm gonna say, and I not everybody's gonna be happy about this, but I think we should, for the purpose of budget planning, I think I was gonna suggest that for now, we actually put in this number, this 6.5% number. Because I think it's gonna be a lot easier for us to go backwards if we end up back at 5.61%, but I think we ought to, it is the budget that the region has approved, at least voted on right now. So there's some reason to think that there's a decent chance we might end up there. Does that seem appropriate to folks?
Yes.
So that means adding
Hmm.
$14,722 to our deficit. So right now we've added about $2,500 tonight. Sorry,
14,722 and 10, what was that number?
10,327. Okay. Anything else on the regional budget before I pull up our budget? Gabe, are you still on?
I am, I'm listening.
Okay, so let me ask you, I'd like to share the budget you shared with me earlier today, but I know that you mentioned in your email that the police chief's contract has not been finalized yet, so.
No, so I think because you're gonna make this a public document, we need to remove that.
Should I
But
just,
I wanna, somehow you guys need to know that there's a figure that you have to plan for, possibly, and I kind of gave you a clue as to what it might be.
yeah, So here's what I'm gonna do before I share the document. And Gabe, let me know if you're comfortable with this, which is I'm just gonna literally like block out, I'm gonna redact
Sure.
those cells
Yep.
for the FY 26 police chief salary. I suppose if if somebody wanted to do the math, they could probably figure it out. But I do think we need to know what the deficit is.
Yep.
That we're planning for. Yeah. All right. So sounds like that works for you. So
Yep.
I'm going to do that now. Okay. All right. So I'm going to just cut to the bottom here. And so we have, actually, I'm going to go ahead and put the regional assessment number in. Just bear with me for a second, guys. Education.
What is it, 107?
So this is going to be, oh, I just closed that.
Can you make that a little bigger, or is that going to screw it up?
I will. Just give me 1 second. I just want to plug in the right.
So the new number is 1761618.
It's line 134.
Yeah. So say that one more time. 1761618.
Yeah, but that's what I get when I add 14722 to the number that's there now.
Yep.
Is
That's
that
correct.
also the
Yep.
number?
That's the number they posted. Yep.
Okay, good.
And then I think it's going to be a little complicated for me to add in those 6 salary positions right now.
Yeah, we'll just do the math outside of the
This-
whole thing.
Yeah. So this deficit is actually uh
10,000 more.
it's plus 10,300. So it's actually, I'm just going to put in the number here.
392,088.
Why do I'm getting a different number. I'm adding. So I'm starting with 376,000.
I can't see what you have there. 376. Yeah, when you add 10,000 to it, you're going to come up with.
So I think it was adding
Hold on, AJ, I got it. Oh,
$10,327.
right.
So
And that's going to bring you to
87,043. Is that what you have?
I have 088, but that's okay. Close enough for hand grenades. We'll go with yours.
Okay. All right. So that's the deficit we're looking at. And this does have a placeholder in for the police chief, which hopefully is going to be close to where we end up. So I think this, correct me if I'm wrong, George or Gabe, I think we've got like most of the adjustments that we're going to need to make have been made, right? Like, is there anything?
Right. The only one that I still don't understand, and I'm hoping George can explain it to me, is when you go up, I'm going to look at the notes here.
Want to give me the line number?
201. Okay, so today I adjusted 198, 199, and 200. I added in the budget 25, the numbers that George had me add. I don't understand why I should be removing, and I did fix, you don't have my new version, but that dividend 01, I fixed
The
that.
differences.
Yeah,
Oh.
I fixed that column.
Okay, good. Yep.
But what I don't understand is why I should be removing the 57,312.
No. Yeah. Okay. I didn't ask you. You shouldn't. It belongs there. What it
Okay.
was fiscal 25. We had the accumulated amount of the lines 99.
Was this?
Yeah, those 3 were in line 201 in total, and those were zeros. And so the only thing I was asking you to do is take the number that was in 201, make it a 0, and then this is the allocation of that number. So the bottom line wouldn't change in FY 25. Becky had all 3 in a single line. And when we put in the library number, we put it in that same line and renamed the line, but we never moved the interest on those 3 items.
Right. So I like it separate so you know what you're paying for.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
that's,
well, it is now, right?
yes,
That's what George has done, yeah.
yes. Yeah,
Okay,
that's,
yeah, that's the way I want it too. Yeah,
yeah.
that's the way we had it last year, and that was fine last year, but obviously
Mhm.
not. And just for your information, I don't know what the actual numbers were in FY25. I just allocate them based on the same allocation as they are in FY26. You can see they're all very close. I think it's close enough.
Right, that's what Ryan gave me. So here, that 57,312, that's a debt exclusion amount. And so you need to make sure and put that on your revenue side.
It's there.
Because your deficit really isn't that 387
Well,
because,
but I think it is on the revenue side. If we go to the revenue
Okay.
page, I
I'm
think it is.
just, okay, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with it. Mainly because I'm gonna be departing soon and I don't want to have,
Yeah, if you look, it's on line 11, 12. What's that line? Line 11. Yeah, you put it
Okay.
in there. You
Good.
put it in there a couple months ago.
okay, so I'm not messing. I just wanted to make sure that it negated itself.
Right, and that
Gosh.
plus the 34,000 on line 14 equals the 91. So it's getting picked up in the tax levy.
Okay, so I'm comfortable that everything has been changed that needs to be changed. Except like what you just did tonight.
Okay.
And all the numbers are in that I'm aware of. The insurance number is solid as far as the Maya number goes. The only, yeah, I think.
Right. All right. So I think this sort of brings us to the question of what are we going to do
Well-
to address this gap?
Can I ask one question?
Go ahead.
Before we decide that this is the gap, can we go to the revenue page?
Yeah.
And talk about some of the revenue lines?
Sure.
Yep, sure.
So I think, there's some estimates in here. The first estimate being new growth. And so have we done a deep dive? Has the Board of Assessors done a deep dive into what this number is?
As far as I know, he has. There are a couple of possibilities, but if they're not done, then they can't be included. So you'll see that next year. Now that's the lowest new growth you folks have ever had.
Yeah, it seems,
So
That's why I
do you-
question, yeah.
Yeah, do you personally know of new houses going up somewhere? Can you identify it that I can take back to him? And say, what about 1, 2, 3, 4? Because I've had to do that in the past with assessors.
Hmm.
I think there's a new house being built on Leonard Road. I don't know if that's in his, I'm sure they have a permit though. I mean,
And there's one on West Pelham Road too.
Yeah, so your average tax bill is 6,000.
Yeah, so 2 houses is 12.
That's 2 houses. Yeah, that 35 is right in there.
And then
although-
there's the substation work that the utility is going to be doing.
Right, now, I still don't have any clear answer on when that's happening, but that will be significant.
and there was a new house on Montague Road. I don't know if it's in last year's new growth.
Yeah, you had quite a big new growth year last year.
Yeah, that was utility work.
Yeah.
They put
Yeah.
up 3-phase lines.
Yes.
That was the 200,000.
Yep.
100 and something, 100.
Mhm.
Is it 200?
I thought it was 200, but that
Well, it's right here on the page. It's 121, 279.
121, 279, yes.
Yeah,
I meant,
and that's not all just the utility.
Yep. So that's kind of the answer I have right now for that one. Do you have others?
No, given the situation we're in, I would just like to put pressure on David to do what he can to make sure we got the most accurate number. But, he's pretty much on top of things, and he's definitely knows what he's doing. So
Mhm.
if he's comfortable with the 35, I don't think we can question it.
but it is so much less than
Yeah.
over the last 5 years.
22 was the only exception.
Mhm.
Yeah,
just one thing about the new construction, I don't think it's fully assessed when it's under construction either. So
No,
that's another factor.
that's what he said to me is he wished he could change it, but some things aren't done.
Well, I think Gabe's method that she mentioned earlier, the average single family is $6,200. And so we have to assume that these houses will probably bring in 6,200 each.
Yep.
Regardless of what they'll be valued at. I mean, not worrying about what they're valued at, just taking a round average. It's not going to be $35,000 between the two of them.
Yeah, you're talking 5.5 houses.
Right, that's right. And I know there's a big addition on Leverett Road.
Mm-hmm.
We all see that. And with the utility though, I'd be okay adding $10,000 to it. The utility came through for us last year, and we know they're doing work this year. I
So
wouldn't mind rounding that number up.
that's fine. When you do the recap sheet, that's when that number gets adjusted.
Yes, we know how that works. We've been lucky, actually. Things have been working in our favor in recent years, but I
Good.
can't count on that every year.
Yeah. So if you're comfortable with that, that would cover those raises you're giving out.
Right.
So that would be 45.
Yeah.
We're getting closer.
What do folks think? Any concerns about that?
No.
I think we should do it.
I wish we could double it.
Yeah, me too. Call your brother.
I know. There's no word of that. Yes,
Her brother has got an inside track on the utility work.
yeah.
Was there anything else on the revenue page that you wanted to review, George?
Yes. So we should talk about, I just want to get this in the minutes. Okay. So what do we think about the state aid number? I mean, we are using the governor's state aid cherry sheet, and history has shown that the governor's is generally the lowest.
That's
So AJ, starting on row 25 and all the one, right? And to the right, there's I pasted into the budget when the governors came out,
mm-hmm.
the actual report. And so the question is, how much greater do we think the House Ways and Means is going to add to this? I mean, can we add 15, 20,000 or 10,000? I'm not sure which line we would even put it in, but what do you think of that, Gabe?
I am concerned about the federal government pulling money from all the states with all the cuts that are going on, and how will that affect what the state has proposed. That's my only concern. This is such an unknown. It's such a strange climate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
I think I agree with that. And I'd like to also add that we should be conservative. We always have been conservative about state aid and other factors that might impact our revenue. And I don't see why we should start to fantasize about.
Well, but we always went higher than the governors. Every year, Becky would always do her little magic, and she would come up with an estimate that was higher than the governors, but always seems to come in lower than the final. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear what her thoughts would be, but that's been I've noticed that over the years, being on the Board of Assessors and working on the budgets, I've seen that.
I just like being conservative about these things, and it's much easier to work in the opposite direction.
Yeah, no, I can't argue with that.
Susie?
We're also we're gonna go with an early town meeting, and we wouldn't have heard how House Ways and Means was working. I know that AJ mentioned House Ways and Means is having a meeting at UMass for public hearing on Monday, the 24th at 11 o'clock at the campus center. And one of the issues they're gonna consider is rural aid. And I sent out a copy of the letter that I sent about rural aid. I'm not sure whether by hearing what they're talking about on Monday will give us a clue about whether we can accurately push some of these numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can.
Some of the reps on the regional school committee had some optimism about, I don't know if it was rural aid or circuit breaker funding, but I don't know where it was coming from, but there was this, maybe it's something that Joe Comerford is sponsoring a bill. I think she mentioned something about that right at our at that select board meeting. But
Mhm.
I'm gonna while we're talking, I'm gonna send the meeting details for that. I'm gonna be attending myself. Sounds like Susie is. Any of you interested in going, that would be
Did
great.
you send us the link to that meeting or is
Yeah.
it in person?
No, I'm gonna send it in the next few minutes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. The departmental revenue on 45. I didn't put a number in there because I'm not sure what that is. Because you also have a miscellaneous. So if department revenue are your tickets and what you pull in for building permits and stuff like that, then I think you could probably add the 15,000 in that column there. But I left that blank.
Yeah, I think. So I'm going back to last year's revenue sheet that from the annual town meeting budget. And I just want to see if we had anything in there. It's regional, what's it called again?
It's departmental revenue.
In line 45.
Oh, it's under local aid. Sorry. Yeah, I'm in the wrong place. Give me 1 second here. I just want to see if what we did about that.
Yeah, I'm used to departmental revenue being miscellaneous.
Yeah.
But I don't know if miscellaneous, your investment income is really up. That's true.
We had 15,800 in the budget that we presented at the town meeting. So we did have a value in there. I
So
don't know what that is. That's a question for Leslie, I think.
it,
Or Dave.
it appears that that happens every year. So I think you could comfortably put maybe 15 in there.
Yes,
Sounds good.
yes. That's,
Let's do it.
I put that in the right line?
You did for me.
Departmental revenue, right? Yeah.
Yep.
But was it in there last year, George? And if it
yes,
was,
at town meeting, it had $15,000 and
can see
and
it.
the actual was 15,008, right? Whatever that number is there.
Yep.
So that should be in there. Yeah.
so FY25 should have 15 in it as well.
No, that's actual. So the FY25 column is based on actual numbers used by the assessors to set the tax rate. So we don't show what we presented last year. What we show on the revenue schedule is the actuals. All those years you're looking at, FY25, 24, 23, those are actuals based on what the assessors did when they submitted the recap sheet to
In
get approval
24.
for the tax rate.
Right.
So we don't know that number yet.
I
So
can. Hmm.
Hmm.
So we're adding, so we're adding $15,000, right?
Mhm.
Okay, is there anything I was concerned about?
Well, I had a question around the payment from state aid, state land, state-owned land, that there had been rumors that that pilot was being renegotiated, and is there any magical way that that could have happened? Because I think it's at 32,000 something now.
We're not hearing it from Aaron.
No, we're not. It's really line 44 is the conversation. The
Yeah,
345,
that's yes.
347,000. Yeah, Aaron hasn't said boo. And Aaron, there's two bills that could bring in revenue for that. There's the Joe Comerford, Aaron Saunders are sponsoring the Quabbin bill,
Mhm.
which would provide more revenue because we have land in Quabbin. And then there's also a payment in lieu of taxes because it was determined that the towns in Western Massachusetts were getting underfunded for their land.
Mm.
And yeah, Susie's right.
Yeah.
It's
They drowned the 4 towns. I think we should just,
Aaron hasn't said boo about those, and I keep meaning to press him on it. I asked him about one of them in our last meeting, but other people have been showing up, and I've been kind of keeping my tongue quiet. But I'll definitely ask him about those, and he knows because every time we meet, I'm always whining about revenues. He knows.
sounds unlikely. So what if we've added 25,000?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we're done.
All right, so let's see where we are now.
Mm.
Yeah, so is there anything else without using cash? Yeah, that's it. I'm hopeful. Let's wait on the cherry sheet and see what happens with the House Ways and Means. Maybe we can get something there. Another 15 or 10, I don't know.
A lot of money.
Every dime matters. So AJ, do you
Yeah.
know what the deficit is now?
362,043. Does that make sense? Yeah.
25. We added 25 from 387. It's not 55. It's not
Yeah, it's
355.
362.
362,033.
Yeah. 43.
I have 043. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so. So I know at least George and Susie had some ideas about appropriate places we might want to use free cash to fund part, some of this deficit. Maybe this is a good time to kind of go into those. But Bob, I see your hand up.
If it would be appropriate for us to take this budget and look at it as individual members of the committee and come back with our ideas about what we could do to diminish this gap.
Yeah.
That's what I would like to do. I'd take some time to look at it, examine it closely, and think about it. So the last budget we got from Gabe was different. This is far more advanced. So I'd like to see it, look at it, and examine it, and then have an opportunity to talk about my ideas too. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fine. We have a little bit more time than we thought we were going to. We have like an extra month. So I think that's appropriate. I think those folks who have started to think about it, and if you want to share some of your thoughts, some ideas, I think it's we don't have to. I don't think we have to hold off on the conversation. I mean, it's gonna take a couple meetings to deal with this and sort it out. George?
Conceptually, one of the things we've always done was try to smooth increases. And when we had new items enter the budget, we didn't always bring them in at 100% into the budget. We would bring them into the budget 100%, but we might use cash to fund a portion of that to kind of smooth that impact. Right now, if we decided to go with this budget and just let the tax levy pick up the 362, which we can do without an override vote because we have excess levy capacity of 800,000, then that's a big spike for the taxpayers. And I think you folks looked over a schedule. I wasn't at the last meeting that showed rough estimates of what the impact of various uses of excess levy capacity would provide. So to me, I would look at new items in the budget, including big increases in health insurance. And we're looking at a restructuring of the police department. And so I think because it's a restructuring that, and it's causing a big increase, and I would include the chief's salary, taking a portion of that, not funding it all that increase, but a portion of the increase. I think those are two big ones in my mind, that I would try to use a little cash to stabilize that increase.
Sorry, those two were the added costs of the police department restructuring and the health insurance increase that were.
Yes, because the health insurance increase is just, it's not a normal increase. I mean, it's
Exactly.
really an extreme example of an increase.
Mhm.
So if this, and it's our future, so it has to be in the operating budget. But I think it's justifiable to apply some cash to that increase. And then the rest of it can come in either in next year in 27 or in 28. We could do it in thirds. I don't know, but that's the way I'm thinking. And of course, we have the school. We know that there's sped costs that will not be with us forever. And so to that extent, I think we could also use cash. I also believe that I wanted to interject that the request for cash, the request to the capital planning committee, it looks like only one item is going to have a budgetary impact and may have a budgetary impact, and that's the grader. So it doesn't look like most years we have a list of things that we want to use cash reserves for, and it's not looking like that's the case going into next year. So using $100,000 or $200,000, $150,000 in reserves to smooth out the budget increase isn't going to hurt. And of course, we can look at the capital planning schedule and we can do that whole analysis of the cash. I don't think it's going to be a problem for us. I think we're still going to be in a strong cash situation, and we're going to be able to deal with the bigger capital items that we're going to have to handle in FY27 when the library well, I don't know. I just think it puts us in a better position.
Yeah, I agree with you, George. Just one thing I want to make sure we don't forget is that we have had some preliminary discussion about a warrant article to build PFAS mitigation
Right.
funding, right? And so,
True.
so that I think we ought to think about that as a capital expenditure for this year.
Yeah. Hopefully, AJ, you decide when we can pull up that schedule
Yeah.
and look at the free cash and put all those reserve requests on there and see how things
Yeah.
look.
I was going to suggest we do that at our next meeting. Because I think you have another capital planning meeting coming up.
We do Thursday.
Yeah, so I think let's plan on doing that at our next meeting, and let's make sure we come up with some plan on the PFAS testing
And we have a number from looking at the minutes from the last meeting. It looks like you had a estimated number for that.
I think it was 50. Is that right?
Yep.
So we could actually, and that schedule is available to everybody, by the way, because it's in our folder, it's in our drive.
Yeah. All right. I see some hands up. So let me go to Gabe and then Susie.
So just some areas that you might want to think about, your unemployment comp. If we find out how much is in that trust may be funded enough to not put money into it because you haven't laid anybody off. So the whole point of that trust fund was to put enough money away to cover unemployment and not impact your budget. That is something you might be able to cut in half. I know it's not much. The same thing with your OPEB. Your OPEB balance, what is it? You may want to reduce it down to 40 this year instead of 50. Those are just thoughts. If you're trying to find alternative ways instead of using your levy.
On OPEB, we could also, we've done this at least once before, right? We could use free cash to fund
OPEB, yes.
that
Yeah.
expense this year.
Yeah, you could do that. Yep.
We did that 2 years ago, right? Or three?
Yeah, if we do an analysis of cash reserves and we decide that we really are in good shape, that might be the better option.
Yep.
Susie,
I think it's important when we're talking about the police budget. The increases, I believe, are coming from the contract negotiations, and that the restructuring part of their budget this year actually reduced what it would cost if we kept the part-time model. So it's important to say that those are contract negotiations, not increased services. You didn't use the word increased services, but I think we can point it more to the contract. And the other possible uses of our cash reserves would be there's a $40,000 legal number. 20,000 was the past. We could do 20,000 out of cash reserves. And I think we've had one opportunity for townspeople to vote on legal increases, which they approved at a special town meeting in January, I think it was. But I feel like we could use cash reserves if needed. And if it gets more than that, then maybe the town gets to vote on whether they want to put in more money into legal. And the other one was the veterans benefit. Yes, we know we have somebody on board and we don't know how much it will cost. And that is a fluid expense. We could fund the increase for the veteran of 5.4K out of cash reserves because it's a fluid line.
okay, Bob?
Yeah, just, I think maybe Susie or George know about this, but it's always occurred to me that we pay a certain amount of money in the school budget towards SPED. And my understanding is that some of that money comes back to us in the way of circuit breaker compensation for some of those expenses. And it seems to me that maybe we could pay SPED from cash reserves, and then the money that came back could go back into our reserves. I don't know if that's a doable thing, but it would make sense to not make it part of the school's operating budget and to separate it and pay for it in that manner, it seems to me. It might take some pressure off us.
Yeah,
George?
yeah, what I would say about that is, I think we need to leave some amount in the school budget because you're always going to have a baseline level of SPED, right? There's a lot of students with IEPs and they're always going to be having SPED resources. They're always going to need SPED resources. For me, it's when those large outplacements happen that we really should have an alternative method for funding those.
Yeah.
And to me, I mean, you heard Amherst. I don't know if you noticed at the four-town meeting, they have a SPED stabilization fund.
That's a good
They're
idea.
funding, right? And they're funding that, and they're doing what we're doing with the unemployment account. They've got a balance. They keep funding that balance.
Mhm.
Goes up. Some years it goes down, goes up, but it's always there, and it keeps the pressure off the operating budget. So I agree, Bob. I think there's a better way to do it than the way we're doing it. But I would say though, there's a certain amount that we always need to leave in the budget.
Susie?
The special student costs that we put 40,000 last year out of cash reserves. This year, they're meeting some of those special student tuition and transportation out of grants. And there's 34,000 in the operating lines of the school budget that we could fund out of free cash like we did, or out of cash reserves like we did last year, 34K.
I think we should do that, yeah. All right. I mean, the sort of aggregate total of all of these uses of cash reserves, I mean, it sounds like easily $200,000.
Mhm.
So that certainly would go a long way towards closing our deficit. But I think I assume we all sort of recognize that this is a year we're gonna have to use some excess levy capacity. That seems unavoidable, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and AJ, I would just add to that, reiterate what we said earlier. $200,000, yes, but we still need to put that in the context of where our cash is and where the other cash requests are, and are we comfortable using 200,000?
So let's at our next meeting, let's actually start with looking at the CapEx planning document that you've created, George, and that we've used the last few years. And let's think about what capital projects are in the works. You'll have had another capital planning meeting by the time we meet next. Let's talk about if we want to do this PFAS $50,000 fund, and then and see where our cash reserves are. Think about that 10% guideline that we've had in place, and then have some discussions about which of these budget lines might be appropriate for us to use cash reserves. And then if folks have other ideas, I think, Bob, you want to take a look at the budget, and we can start that process of talking about any individual budget lines that you want us to deliberate on. Bob.
I wanted to ask Gabe if she has any update on what the balance is for our PFAS account and
I
where.
think, well, right now I'm getting ready to do a report that's due next Tuesday to the DEP. And I've got all the bills and I brought them home to work on it because it's pretty lengthy. We are going in the negative when these next bills get paid. And I will give you, I hate to guess. So I'll send that once I know what it is after Gail runs the warrant.
And did we ever hear anything about the mitigation over at the fire station? Is there any?
No.
Okay, we have to find out about that and make sure we have a grip on that too.
As far as I know, Susie and I looked into it a little bit and they're not doing anything.
What we know is
Next year.
it's not happening. There's no mitigation right now. There's still
Right.
the testing. So we suggested that the $5,000 for mitigation come off the budget,
Mhm.
and the other 5,000 could come from cash reserves.
So if you look at line 161, I took the 5,000 off,
Mhm,
Okay,
and then there's the 5,000 for station mitigation.
mhm.
okay,
Yeah,
just a concern. Thank you.
no, definitely.
Okay. Anything else on the budget for us to discuss tonight? Anybody have any ideas, seeds they wanted to plant tonight? We'll continue this discussion at our next meeting. Susie?
And for the things that we don't know that might come out in our favor, once we assemble a budget, any revenues that we didn't anticipate come off what we plan to have for the tax levy. Is that right? It doesn't go into free cash right away.
Well,
I guess I still need to understand those nuts and bolts.
The assessors will take the total budget and then they'll do an analysis of all the revenues. They'll know what the cherry sheet is because the state aid would have been approved. The budget should be approved is approved by then. They'll have good information for calculating what the local tax is. They'll put all those in and they'll end up with the amount that they need to raise from property taxes. And so any of these estimates that we're off on are going to impact that amount to be raised from property taxes. And hopefully, like you said, New growth will be higher, the cherry sheet will be higher, and the amount that we're gonna present at town meeting to be raised from the tax levy will be lower when the assessors set the tax rate. Cross your fingers. Well, and like Bob said, we want to be conservative so that that is what happens.
Right.
And we want to brace the taxpayers for the worst.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's see, do we have anything else we need to discuss tonight?
We're meeting next week.
So let's talk about our next thing. We added next week,
Are we meeting with department heads actually?
It didn't get announced. We haven't planned it. We put in an extra meeting because I still believe that should be part of our process, but we don't have something clear to show them yet.
I think it's too early to.
Put that off. So I
Well-
believe we should meet next Tuesday so that we can find out if we have a budget that we need to represent to the public a little closer to that, because they didn't know where we were at when we talked to the departments.
Well, and we'll get to kick around these ideas that we're all having, and Bob, and I know said that he might have some other ideas, so things that we could help us get closer. I do think it's a great concept, meeting with the department heads. I think it's really important that they understand where we're at. Ask them to put their thinking caps on, but also ask them to be prepared at town meeting to discuss their budgets, because if there are people at town meeting who want to decrease the impact on the tax rate, they're going to start making suggestions on some of the lines. And if I'm a department head, I want to be there and I want to be able to explain to everybody what those motions might mean to the town.
I guess we need to figure out again when the budget has to be voted by us so it can go on to the warrant. So we had it as April 1st was the vote for the budget, right?
Yeah, maybe I should pull up the schedule. Okay. All right, so I've just changed. Annual town meeting is May 31st or June 7th. So that means, let's work backwards from that.
Yeah. Plenty of time.
This is based on which meeting date, AJ?
Well, let's assume it's May 31st, right?
Easier, yeah.
Yeah, the sooner one, yes.
And so that means that our budget info session is probably going to be on May 29th. I think we usually do it the Thursday, or at least the last few years, the Thursday before annual town meeting.
Mhm.
All
Right, but it's really down to when we have to have the warrant article done.
Right. So,
Working back, yep.
yeah,
It's 25 days difference.
so this is going to be, that's got to be 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks
Well,
plus.
I'd go with 3. I'd go with 3 to be safe, but yes.
All right, so this would be
A month later.
like May
Um,
13th. No, is that right?
Yeah.
That's a month, that's a Tuesday, I take it.
Yeah. So that means then we approve the budget on May 6th.
So
So, yeah.
I got to add in some dates here. No, this would be April.
second, Sunday.
April, let's see. It's April 11th.
April Fools.
I'm just adding some open dates for meetings.
One,
Not the 11th.
and April 15th.
8th. So you're saying April 1st and April 15th?
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So,
The clock is ticking.
so the question is do we want to meet next Tuesday? That was what we were planning on. Might still be a good idea. What do folks think?
I'm in favor of next week.
I like it for two reasons. One, we can kick around all these ideas we have for balancing the budget. And I also, I think the committee would want to hear what happened at the House Ways and Means meeting.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna do
25th.
funding. Continue budget planning. Okay. All right. So we're meeting next Tuesday.
And if we solve it all, then we can skip the later meetings.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right. I sent that the details on that Ways and Means meeting. You should have it in your email. I think it's going to be a big deal. I believe because I've got a kid in the high school, and they actually asked for every family for a permission slip to allow their kid to attend the meeting. So I think they're actually expecting a lot of educators and potentially a lot of students to be at that meeting. So should be an interesting opportunity. Okay.
One
Anything?
question?
Yeah,
I got a
go.
question.
Sure.
Yeah, as the note keeper, I noticed there's a person attending our meeting with the name Town of Shutesbury. And for the record, I'd like to know the name of that person.
I apologize. I signed in with I'm Frank McGinn, MCGINN, Towns Buildings Committee, and Stephen Dalmas asked me to come on tonight to make sure we had the 10,000, but I saw it in your budget line, so everything's okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. What was your name again? Sean, you said?
Frank.
Oh, Frank,
Frank. Oh, that's right. Sorry. Frank. And how do you spell your name again?
MCGINN.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Frank, if there's anything else that the building committee needs to discuss with the FinCom, somebody can contact me offline and we can
Okay.
make sure to get it on the agenda.
This week, you're going to get a spreadsheet of what we've done. and
Great.
what we have done. That's coming out this week.
Okay.
Great.
So I think I'm actually going to suggest, because that'll be really good information. I think there's some interest in the committee actually hearing that. So maybe I'll ask for you guys to attend a future meeting and kind of walk us through that.
Yep.
Okay. Great.
I'm the interim chair now.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, AJ, I just want to remind you to send us a copy of the budget.
Yep.
Thanks.
So I think what I'll do is I'll plug in those new salary updates, right? Might as well put that in before I send it out.
Yes.
George, do you trust me to do that, or?
Do you trust you to do that?
That's a good question. I think so.
I mean,
think
if you
can-
want to send it out to me and I'll put them in and I can redistribute it, I mean, that's up to you. I'm happy to do it if you'd like.
Okay, if you don't mind, let me send you what I was sharing tonight. So I think that's got everything up to date except the 6 salary positions, that amount to a 10,000.
Well, I've got the notes, AJ, the minutes, so I'll double check everything.
All right, great. Thanks, George. All right, so Bob, George will send that out.
All right, great.
Yes, I will. I'll try and get it all out to everybody by Thursday.
Appreciate it.
Can we make a motion to adjourn our meeting?
Yeah, there's a Celtics game.
Yeah,
Second,
Great. George,
Arvanitis, aye.
proves that.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, eye.
Mosier, I.
Salvador, I.
And Stein, aye.
Thank you very much, AJ.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Nice work.
That was
Thank you.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, good meeting, folks.
Yeah.
Take care, folks. See you next
Bye.
week.